All right, let's get right into it. We've got some awesome source material here, all about griffins.
Oh, yeah, lots to unpack there.
So much to uncover about these legendary creatures. You might think you know griffins, but their history, let me tell you, it's wild. So many twists and turns.
Totally agree. It's a long story. Really fascinating.
Definitely. Okay, let's start with the basics then. When we say griffin, what picture should be in our heads?
Well, the classic griffin, right? You've got the body of a lion. Strong, powerful.
Right. King of the beasts and all that.
Exactly. But then on top of that, you have the head and wings of an eagle. The striking mix, right? You've got strength, the vigilance of the eagle.
And it connects to the earth, but also the sky, the heavens.
Yeah, there's a lot of symbolism tied into that. But, looking through these sources, the griffin's look hasn't always been so clear cut.
Oh, interesting. So some variations out there.
Oh, yeah, big time. For example, some ancient Greek artists, they sometimes drew griffins with lion forelegs instead of eagle talons.
Ah, instead of the talon. So full-on lion legs.
Yep. Kind of makes you wonder why.
It does. Maybe ideas about griffins changed as time went on.
Could be. Plus, you gotta think these stories, these images, they traveled across cultures over huge distances.
Right. It's like a giant game of telephone.
Exactly. And as they spread, they got mixed with local ideas, different artistic styles, even encounters with real animals probably got thrown in the mix.
And boom, you've got a new spin on the griffin. So the one we know today, it's like a blend of all these different influences.
Exactly. Now, these sources mention creatures that look a lot like griffins showing up way back in Mesopotamia, like 3000 BC.
Wow. So we're talking way back in time.
Seriously old school. And what's interesting is those early Mesopotamian griffins, they look different. They were often shown pulling chariots.
Oh, like they're the muscle, showing off their strength.
Exactly. And it links them to powerful figures, royalty maybe.
Okay, so a lion with a bird head pulling a chariot. That's intense.
It really makes you think about what ancient civilizations believed about these creatures, right? Were they like guardians, messengers from the gods, or just symbols of power?
That's a good question. And it seems like that connection to chariots, to valuable stuff, that eventually led to griffins being so tied to treasure, especially gold.
Yeah, in Greek and Roman stories, griffins are almost always guarding treasure. They're fierce protectors, ready to battle anyone who tries to steal their gold.
So real encounters with scary animals or just stories. Tough to know.
Yeah.
But speaking of stories, there's this whole debate about griffin wings. Were they always part of the picture?
It's a great question. Some early accounts, they're kind of vague about their flying skills. Some folks think maybe griffins started out wingless, or maybe they just weren't very good at flying.
Okay, so not exactly soaring through the skies.
Maybe not. There's even this one account from Apollonius of Tyana that says they had webbed feet. He said they used them for short leaps, not for powerful eagle flights.
So more like a hopping griffin than a majestic flyer.
Yeah, definitely a different image. So how did they go from these little hops to ruling the skies? Well, seems like their wings, just like their whole image, evolved over time. Stories spread, cultures mix their own beliefs into the myth.
Like we were saying earlier, it's that giant game of telephone.
Exactly. And those powerful wings, they became super important to what the griffins symbolized.
And then this change in their look, it kind of paved the way for griffins to get a whole new meaning in Christianity.
Absolutely. You've got the earthly, the lion part, mixed with the heavenly, the eagle part, made them a perfect symbol for the two sides of Christ, his humanity and his divinity.
Makes sense. I mean, Dante even puts a griffin-drawn chariot in his Purgatorio.
Seriously, so far from those old Mesopotamian chariots.
Total blow up. It really shows how these creatures can change with the times, change cultures even, but still keep their core meaning.
Totally. And speaking of changes, let's lighten things up a bit. What about griffin collectibles?
Oh yeah, got to talk about those.
Medieval folks were crazy about owning a piece of the mythical, right?
Big time. Griffin claws, eggs, feathers. But turns out, a lot of that stuff was fake.
Big time fakes. Ostrich eggs, ibex horns, they got pretty creative.
It's crazy what people would believe. So what does that tell us about griffins?
I think it shows just how powerful these creatures were in people's imaginations. They sparked stories, tall tales, even these elaborate forgeries like Charlemagne, the emperor. Even he had a drinking cup supposedly made from a griffin claw.
Wow, talk about a status symbol. I bet that cup could tell some stories.
It really shows how ingrained griffins were in medieval culture. From the fanciest palaces to the everyday marketplace, they were everywhere.
So a mix of myth and reality where the line gets kind of blurry.
Exactly. But at the heart of it all, there's this fascination with the griffin, this creature that represented power, mystery, and something almost divine. Really is. It's wild how they captured people's imaginations back then.
Yeah, totally. It makes you wonder, like, where did the whole griffin idea even come from? I mean, we've talked about the symbolism, the treasure guarding, even those crazy fake collectibles. But what sparked it all?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Scholars have been debating that for ages.
Yeah, I bet.
There are a few theories, of course. One idea is that it all started with travelers' tales. Those stories people brought back from far-off lands, probably exaggerated along the way.
Oh, I can see that. Imagine some tired traveler coming back from the mountains describing this fierce animal, lion body, eagle head, the works. And each time the story's told, it gets a little wilder.
Exactly. And suddenly, bam, you've got the griffin.
That makes sense. But there's another theory, right? Something about fossils.
Oh, yeah, that one's pretty interesting. It suggests griffins might have been inspired by, well, dinosaur fossils.
Dinosaur fossils. Whoa, that's a twist.
Right. So picture this. An ancient traveler stumbles across a skeleton. Maybe it's a protoceratops or a Psittacosaurus. These dinos had beaked skulls and these bony frills that could easily be mistaken for, griffin features.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those frills do kind of look like griffin ears. And the beak. Well, that's a pretty clear connection.
Exactly. And here's the thing. These fossils were often found in areas where, guess what? They also found gold deposits.
No way.
Yeah.
So it's like those ancient travelers were piecing together a myth, but based on real clues from the earth.
That's the idea. So maybe, just maybe, those fantastical creatures had a little bit of reality behind them.
Mind-blowing. So those travelers were like the original paleontologists,
Yeah.
just with a bit more imagination thrown in.
Huh. Yeah, exactly. It's a cool thought, right? Our understanding of the world is always changing based on what we see, but also what we imagine.
Absolutely. Speaking of imagination, we talked about how griffin images changed over time. Like, why did the Greeks sometimes draw them with lion legs instead of eagle talons?
Good question. It's probably a mix of things. The Greeks, they were really good at mixing mythology, borrowing from other cultures, adding their own spin.
So they weren't just copying, they were making it their own.
Totally. So griffins with lion legs, maybe it reflects other lion creatures in their myths, like the Sphinx.
Makes sense. So it's like taking inspiration, but then fitting it into their own world.
Precisely. They were constantly reworking those myths to match their own beliefs, their values. Maybe they emphasized the lion part of the griffin to make it even more fierce, more powerful, or to link it to their own gods and heroes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it brings us back to that idea of the griffin's meaning changing over time. We've talked about them as guardians of treasure, symbols of power, even representing both sides of Christ.
It's true, the griffin's a multi-layered creature. It's meant different things throughout history, reflecting different cultures, different eras.
And you mentioned how they even became part of Christian symbolism. How did that happen? How did this creature from ancient myths become linked to Christ?
Well, it's a great example of how old symbols can take on new meanings in different contexts. So in Christianity, that double nature of the griffin, lion, and eagle, it became a powerful way to talk about Christ's humanity and divinity.
So the lion represents his earthly side, and the eagle his divine spirit.
Exactly. And this idea really clicked with medieval Christians. They saw the griffin as a symbol of Christ's victory over death, his ascension to heaven.
So that connection probably helped make griffins even more popular in medieval art and stories.
Definitely. You see griffins everywhere. From those fancy illuminated manuscripts to sculptures and tapestries, they became this symbol of spiritual power, a reminder of Christ's triumph over evil.
It's incredible how a creature from ancient myths could mean so much to people centuries later. So we've covered so much about griffins. We've talked about their ancient origins, their changing meaning, even their connection to dinosaur fossils.
It's been quite the journey, hasn't it?
It has. And I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for them now. They're not just mythical beasts, they're like windows into history, into culture, into the power of imagination.
I agree. And there's always more to learn, more to discover about them. Their story keeps unfolding as we learn more about the past and as our own views change.
That's so true. And there's something else I've been wondering about. We talked about griffins guarding gold and maybe being inspired by dinosaur fossils. But what about those one-eyed people who supposedly stole gold from griffins? They sound pretty intense.
Ah, you're talking about the Armaspians. They're a fascinating part of Griffin lore, often described as fierce warriors who lived in a land of constant sunshine.
The land of constant sunshine. Sounds pretty nice, actually. Except for, the whole fighting griffins for gold thing.
Right. Well, according to the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, the Arimaspians lived north of the Scythians, in a region where griffins were said to guard vast treasures.
So it was like a constant battle between these one-eyed warriors and the mighty griffins. Wow, that's some epic storytelling. Makes you wonder if there's any truth to it.
Of course, with mythology, it's always hard to separate fact from fiction. But these stories are definitely captivating. They offer a glimpse into the beliefs and values of ancient cultures, their fears and aspirations, their understanding of the world around them.
It's like looking through a window into the past. A window with some pretty wild and fantastical stained glass, I might add.
Indeed. And I think in a world that's so focused on technology, on science, the Griffin reminds us that there's still room for wonder, for the magic of stories.
I love that. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Exploring all these ancient secrets, piecing together the Griffin's story.
It really has. And who knows what other mythical creatures are out there waiting for us to uncover their secrets.
Oh, I can't wait to find out. But until then, let's keep those imaginations soaring.